We now move on to the question and answer portion of the debate from our panelists. For those of you that are just joining us this evening, on the back of your programs are the rules that have been agreed to, the format of the debate by both campaigns. So we will be keeping strict time and adhering to that time schedule very carefully. We'll begin this evening with Mr. Jeffrey Sicher.
Thank you to both of you for coming and sharing your time and your thoughts and ideas with everyone tonight. My first question is to Representative Cox. Cities across the Commonwealth are faced with considerable blight issues, whether it be landlord or tenant neglect. What do you feel the state legislator should do to help reduce blight in our major Pennsylvania cities?
You have 1 minute and a half to answer.
Part of the problem that part of the origin of blight comes from the high taxes that are paid by those landlords in the cities. Landlords are hit with ever-increasing taxes. In the city of Reading, there's also fines and fees that are piled on to landlords for things that they many times have no control over. But one of the things that we as a state can do, and it's no surprise to many in this room, that property taxes are one of the biggest costs to landlords, and one of the biggest costs to landlords that they have to continue to pay. They're not going to be able to improve their properties. They're not going to be able to do what they need to do to rent it. And so you end up with blight as properties become unaffordable for landlords and you leave the properties vacant. Next thing you know, you've got a situation where crime increases and absentee landlords and other things will follow when you've got homes and commercial properties that are just not occupied.
You know, Jeff, thank you for the question, sir. I appreciate it. Blight's an important issue because we've seen success, and you'll notice throughout the night that my answers won't be Democratic or Republican answers. I'm going to go with what solution works best. And we know from New York City that solving the blight problem was one of the things Mayor Giuliani did to turn the crime problem around, right? So unfortunately, one of the things, and we need to work on that issue, but one of the things important to solving those small crimes is to have a law enforcement agency that can effectively police the city. And unfortunately, in the last two budgets that my opponent voted for, there were cuts to local law enforcement, and that's not the way to get it done. I agree with Representative Cox that solving the property tax issue, and I'm pretty sure we're going to have a healthy debate on that tonight, is one of the factors that has to be considered in order to give landlords what they need and reasonable property taxes in order to afford those properties. But a big part of solving the issue of blight is solving crime and also providing economic opportunity in our cities, right? So we understand also that along with blight and economic development challenges go the ability for our cities to have, and young people and folks in the city to have economic opportunity. And unfortunately, those funds have also been cut recently in the last two budgets. But police work and economic opportunity, I think, are critical to solving those challenges.
Representative Cox, you have 1 minute to rebut if you would like it.
Thank you. What we're going to see a lot of tonight, I think, is big government versus small government, and everything has a cost. Mr. Saar is talking about law enforcement reducing crime. One of the things that has driven landlords out of Reading is the increasing taxes, the increasing fees, and so forth. The city council has increased the cost to the homeowner and the property owner in general. That has driven them out of the city. When you look at something like that, there's a cost that seems to be forgotten. Where is that going to come from? Economic development is another issue there. If we have hand-picked solutions that are funded through our state budget, if we have law enforcement that's funded on the state level, we are taking the local community out of it, and we are taking the local responsibility out of it. The local law enforcement needs to be a locally developed, state-supported institution. Same thing goes for economic development. We need to create an environment where businesses can thrive and where individuals can thrive. That's when economic development truly happens.
I would just like to respond by adding, we will have an interesting discussion tonight on big government versus small government, because some of the solutions that my opponent proposes are big government solutions, like Harrisburg taking control of funding for our schools, like Harrisburg saying what you can do in your private life. But unfortunately, on this issue, if I understand him correctly, he's actually saying that it's not a big deal that Reading has had their law enforcement budget cut. And the fact of the matter is, while this district won't represent the city of Reading, for the neighboring communities where we do represent in the 129th to not realize that the problems of Reading are just across the river and will have a significant impact is foolish in my view. So I think, I do not believe in big government solutions. A lot of the things you're going to hear tonight are where I believe in more of a limited government, and my opponent stands for a bigger government. But in this case, I stand proud to say we need to support law enforcement in the city of Reading.
Mr. Sicher, do you have a follow-up question on that?
Well, both of you have mentioned economic opportunity. Could you give an example of what you would propose as far as economic opportunity for the issue?
You're directing that at Mr. Saar?
Yes, correct.
You have a minute and a half.
Sure. I'll tell you, Jeff, probably the best example we can look to in the city of Reading right now is I met recently with John Scott, who's the head of the Berks Economic Development Corporation. And Mr. Scott was just trying to help me understand the factors that go into economic development in the region. One of the most important things he said was that our employers, some of our manufacturers, believe it or not, actually can't find a skilled workforce to meet their needs. These are good jobs. These are $50,000, $60,000 a year jobs that could go up. And one of the things the Berks Economic Development Corporation did, which is partially a government solution, teaming with private industry, which is what I support, is a program called Careers in 2 Years. Careers in 2 Years is actually a website where we can encourage young people to go and understand how technical trades can help prepare them for very, very good jobs in our area. And it can help mitigate this perception that somehow the trade industry or going into the trades is a less valuable tool. We need that in a place like Berks County because we have employers who really need folks who are trained in those skills. So that's one thing I would do.
Mr. Cox, Representative Cox.
Again, the distinction here is whose job is it to solve the problem. Economic development, as I touched on earlier, is something that comes from making an environment for an entire state. The problems that we have in economic development, a lot of that money that has gone to local efforts, Mr. Saar brought up the Berks Economic Partnership. While we look at the individual results of some of those organizations around the state, what we have there is a system of picking winners and losers. We are funding bodies like the Berks Economic Partnership who then go out and they selectively give out tax credits and they give out incentives to bring individual businesses here. I, on the other hand, would like to see us take that same funding and put it toward the overall lowering of business taxes for all businesses. Instead of picking keystone opportunity zones here and there around the state, we need to look and say, how can we make Pennsylvania business friendly for everybody who has a business here and for every business that wants to relocate here? That's the key. We can't be hand-picking winners and losers, and that's what we've been doing for far too long.
Would you like to respond?
I would, and I would like to point out Mr. Cox mentioned something very important. Keystone Opportunity Zones were created under the Rendell administration, but have also continued under the Corbett administration. They're targeted tax relief, which I would think is a conservative principle. Targeted tax relief for small businesses in troubled areas. There's probably no better example of something we need to do is provide tax relief for a small business owner who says, I'm going to start a business in the city of Reading. And we just heard my opponent say that's not the job of government. In fact, he voted against Keystone Opportunity Zones, which were overwhelmingly supported by Republicans and Democrats throughout the last 6 years. So, that's a sharp difference. I have great respect for my opponent being true to his convictions, but we have a sharp, sharp difference on this point.
Targeted tax relief, I couldn't have said it better, whether it's property tax relief or business tax relief. When you do targeted tax relief, if I say that aisle up there is not going to have to pay taxes, that takes the existing burden and it shifts it to this part of the room. That's not a fair approach. That is not a conservative approach to things, and that is not something I can support. The Keystone Opportunity Zones and the way they've currently been used and structured, whether it was Rendell, whether it's Corbett, it doesn't matter. I oppose the concept because what it ends up being is a system of whams, walking around money. They're not called that in the budget, but it essentially means a legislator can go to the governor and say, this is how I believe things should be done in this district, and he goes back and he curries political favor with individuals and with businesses who are selectively receiving those funds and those benefits. And that's a real problem. I stand by my approach to provide relief to everyone. That's why property tax relief has to be for everyone, businesses and individuals alike. Property owners are suffering the brunt of the property tax. Businesses as a whole are suffering the brunt of high business taxes because we're paying for Keystone Opportunity Zones. Thank you.